In a world racing toward automation, where AI is taking over tasks like writing reports, analyzing data, and even giving feedback, what's left for us humans? Welcome to Irreplaceable, the podcast that explores what only people can do and why those things still matter more than ever. Every episode, we'll talk with business leaders, thought leaders, and change makers who are proving that human qualities like judgment, curiosity, and empathy aren't soft skills, they're strategic and competitive advantages. We'll explore questions like, can intuition still drive great leadership? How do we build trust in an AI-powered world? And what happens to accountability when no one's behind the algorithm? This podcast isn't about resisting the future, it's about designing it with humans at the center. Because in the race to win in the marketplace, some things just can't be replaced. Welcome to episode 2 of the Irreplaceable podcast. I'd like to introduce our 2 expert guests for today's episode, who are going to discuss the role of human curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking in the age of AI. Jason Mlicki is principal of Rattleback, the marketing agency renowned for helping professional services firms turn bold ideas into measurable growth. Jason's been advising leadership teams for 20 years now about how to sharpen their value propositions, build robust thought leadership programs, and develop demand-generating content. Jason co-hosts the popular Rattle and Pedal podcast, the link to which you can find in the podcast notes. Dr. Mark Marone is Director of Global Insights at Harvard Business Publishing Corporate Learning, just rebranded this week as Harvard Business Impact. Mark is responsible for developing research-based thought leadership to support clients globally. For over 20 years, he's been in the training performance improvement industry, researching, writing, and speaking about workplace issues. Mark has published numerous articles and white papers on leadership, corporate culture, and employee engagement, and co-authored 2 books on sales strategy. Here's my first question. In the age of Gen AI, what really will the traits of curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking be even more important for business leaders? So, Mark, I'd like to start with you on this one.
Thanks, Tony. And thanks for having me on. No doubt. I think the answer is yes, they will be more critical. And I recently ran across an academic paper that really supported this out of Oxford University. And they found that AI-focused roles are nearly twice as likely to require these types of skills, the critical thinking, the creativity, what have you, compared to non-AI roles. And so a really fascinating study. And when you think about these kind of the 3 C's, right? Curiosity is about asking questions, what, why, how, what have you. AI can generate answers, but leaders still need to ask the right questions. And, as I've said before, curiosity really comes from our experiences, our perspectives, where we went to school, where we worked, or everything around that goes into defining the questions that we pose, right? That makes us curious. So that makes it really kind of a unique human capability. And so those leaders who are curious can guide AI to help explore new possibilities, not just kind of repeat the old ones, right? Now, I think the second C, right, creativity, is all about innovation, right? And that's, I think, what differentiates and what can differentiate businesses, because AI levels the playing field, but creativity is really where the competitive advantage could come. And that's the human edge, if you will, that allows people to imagine what hasn't been done, right? Reframing challenges, rethinking business models, connecting dispersed or disparate ideas. And so clearly really, really important, I think. And then when you get to critical thinking, you mentioned critical thinking, that's what I think ultimately will be important for ensuring that AI produces not only the right results, but ethical ones as well, right? And again, it's about having that ability to critically think about the questions that were being asked of it, how it works, and then confirming and validating the output, right? And what we're seeing in some other articles as well is that people are losing these skills in a sense when they allow Gen AI or AI in general up to do these things for them, right? You just pose it a question and then you kind of run with it. And it's that cognitive offloading that they talk about that's really resulting in some of the decline in critical thinking, especially. I'd like to turn it over to Jason and get his thoughts. Back to that study from Oxford that I just mentioned, really interesting. They also found that as AI roles grow, the number of non-AI roles that require these skills are increasing as well.
Interesting.
And so what we're really seeing then is that critical thinking, creativity, curiosity as unique human skills becoming more important in business overall, not just in the realm of AI.
Yeah. You know, Mark, I had coming into this, I had fixated on the word curiosity. And so that was where my head was. And you took it so much deeper. And, you know, for a living, we work with subject matter experts to help bring out their best thinking. That's how we make a living as an agency, right? And what I've noticed is a number of experts that will do something that I call they're outsourcing their thinking to AI. And they'll say, let me ask my co-pilot, right? And so what I've been coaching them to do is I tell them you're using AI backwards. So you don't want to use AI as an answer engine. You want to use it as a question engine. You want to go to it and say, okay, I want to develop thinking on this, or I want to think about this topic. What are the questions that I need to be asking to get the right answers? And when you do that, all of a sudden AI functions like a thought partner, not like an outsourcing of your thinking. And we've just seen that work a lot to just shift the way you approach it. And it keeps the critical thinking from atrophying, because it is easy to read the responses it gives you and think it seems so coherent and it makes total sense. But you have to remember, it's a large language model that predicts the next word based on the last one, based on everything that's ever been published. So it's giving you, by definition, I always talk about zigging and zagging. It's giving you the world zig, and the human's job is to zag, to figure out where the other direction is that we need to go. And so that's the best way we found it to accomplish that.
Yeah, Jason, it's an interesting point, because I was going to ask you both about, how can Gen AI be an enabler of, curiosity? Jason, as you've worked with clients on this, have you found that they're becoming sort of more curious as they dig in and ask AI to provide them the questions? In other words, is there a closed loop learning process?
I think to your point, it all depends on the individual. I thought a lot about this too when you set it up. It's that I think about so many people, so many managers, and Mark, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. They manage from their experiences. So the way that they manage the people that work for them is based on their experiences in a role or in a job over time. But those experiences are based on something that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, even 1 year ago may not be as relevant as it used to be. So it seems to me that we need managers that are curious, because the people that are reporting to them are working in a different environment than they develop their skills in. And that's okay. There's a big discussion now about this idea of the pyramid-shaped organization disappearing and it becoming a diamond. And there's a lot of people that are freaking out about this. And I think it's overblown. And the reason I think it's overblown is that I think that they think that the way that they learned and built their expertise and their knowledge is going away, but they don't recognize it's going to be replaced by different forms of learning. So it's not like senior leaders of tomorrow are going to suddenly not have any knowledge. They just will have acquired it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we did a study last year. We talked about leaders managing their paradigms and patterns. And it's all about how people make decisions based on what you were saying, Jason, this perspective that they've always come from, right? Their leadership style, what's worked in the past. And questioning those and challenge them really results in having a much broader mindset to allow that learning, right? And I think to your point too, when we talk about learning, it's really, to me, learning is really becoming the new competitive advantage. And it's moving so fast and the skills are evolving so quickly. That's not an easy thing to do. And doesn't mean it's not as simple, rather, as just going and taking some modules or, taking a course. It's about understanding your business and how it's changing. It's really, really critical to understand how to make decisions around what agents you use and where they're going to fit in and how they work with people if you don't understand your business. Right.
Yes.
And if that's really changing quickly, you better be learning.
Mark, you and I have talked offline a couple of times about the future of training in general, corporate training in general. And I wonder if what you just said is basically the future of training is teaching people how to learn, because so many people don't know how to learn. And in their defense, sometimes they haven't learned how to learn. I'll give a bad example, but my kids, I about lost my mind one day. This was during COVID, because I found out in their social studies class in middle school, the teacher was giving them PowerPoint decks with fill in the blank holes for note taking. So she'd give a lecture and they would just fill in the blanks. That you're not learning how to learn. You're not learning how to hear someone present an idea and hear what's important and take good notes, right? That's been completely wiped out of this particular class. And how many people are like that have been come up through an educational system, whether it's college or even grad school, where it's so structured and so contained that they don't know how to learn?
Yeah. A related point I wanted to talk about it was around, Jason, in your world of professional services where you're calling on clients, and you've talked about how it's important to be thinking less about being a know-it-all, coming in with the answers and becoming more of having a learn-it-all mindset, right? And you're obviously on the bleeding edge. You're facing off with clients and they're looking to you to basically make them successful. How is the learn-it-all mentality working for you? And secondly, how much patience do clients have for that approach?
Well, boy, those are really hard questions, right? I first became aware of this notion of the know-it-all and learn-it-all from a client of ours by the name of Jump Associates and a guy by the name of Dave Patnaik, who talks a lot about this.
Yeah.
And if you think about consultants in general, consultants built their living on pattern recognition, right? That was what consultants did. That's what best practices is. Best practices is we looked at hundreds of companies that do this. We picked out the ones that did it best. And now we've said this is what they are. But you think about ChatGPT or any large language model, it's the ultimate know-it-all. It knows everything. It has consumed every piece of public content the internet has. If you have an enterprise license inside of a large corporation, it's consumed every piece of content your organization has that's not public. So it's the ultimate know-it-all. You can't compete with that as the know-it-all. So I think in that particular role, consultants themselves need to rethink their personal value propositions. It's not about pattern recognition anymore. It's sort of about having the willingness to put themselves out there and learn. And then also to the client say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to your question. We know the prevailing answer to the question is X, but I don't think X is right. And I think we need to explore it further together. And we need to be curious enough and have enough critical thinking to try to go find why. Because there's probably a better way to do this than the way we've been doing it, right? So those, to me, in our world, those are the consultants that are going to win. Those are the ones that are going to win in this era, when the ones that recognize that my job as pattern recognizer is gone. That's unnecessary anymore. Nobody needs that.
It's a tough thing too, because they all have playbooks, they all have formulas, right? And that's what allows them to maintain high margins. That's going to be a challenge, right?
100%.
Yeah. And I'm, as someone who's been in that business, I'm a non-believer in the notion of best practice. And I think it has, and it has to do, I think, Mark, with the point you made just a moment. What your business needs may have absolutely nothing to do with what other businesses in your category do, right? And, I just think that's becoming more and more relevant to your point about, differentiating as a professional services firm, right? If I can, to your point, write a really good prompt in a Gen AI tool, so can everyone else, right? So what is it you're doing about learning about someone's business in a way that's immersive and allowing them to think about what's unique and differentiating for you? Yeah.
Best practices or worst practices, right? More often than not.
Agreed.
But I think, having said that, Gen AI could be a really, and probably is, right, a really valuable tool for helping people get outside of that and really think of different ways, of different perspectives and different ways of looking at a problem or a challenge, and different ways of thinking about it, right? Bringing it in as a thought partner, if you will.
Yeah.
Mark, you and I do a lot of research. You do it a whole lot better than I do, but we both do research. And one of the things I've loved using AI for is, whether it's qualitative research, quantitative research, whatever we're going to do, we're developing the instrument, and I ask it, I say, hey, what are the questions I'm not thinking about that I should be asking? And often it gives me things I never even thought to ask, in ways I never thought to ask them. And so it's a really good thought partner in that regard. Now, can I do those with my peers? Of course. But, we've talked about some of the benefits of it kind of maybe being real time or having that kind of like explore. It helps me explore my own brain a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Before having the conversation with my peer.
A consultant can really bring in a subject matter expert from their client organization and that industry before even actually starting the work, right? And it's almost like having, hey, a director from pharma, or a sales manager, sales leader from pharma sitting right next to you and engaging with it to understand, so you don't go in with just a hammer, kind of one size fits all.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, Jason, this flipping the script that you've talked about here, regarding using a generative AI to develop questions that are, impactful. irrespective of what tools you use and irrespective of the outputs, you as a thought partner have to curate those questions, right? And you've got to say, here are the ones that the client really needs to think about, and let me explain to you why, right? So the volume of there and the depth may be, but at the end of the day, it's you who's looking at them and saying, here's the ones I want to put in front of you and slide across the desk and discuss.
Yeah. And I think Mark put that really well a little bit earlier, just this idea of it's the critical thought that you take after that activity and say, well, wait a minute, are those the right questions? Maybe those are the wrong ones. Which ones can we throw away?
Okay, so this great example from an HBO article a few weeks ago entitled AI in the Boardroom. And it was fascinating because, they took this sort of an old type industry, footwear manufacturer out of Austria, and a consultant came in with Gen AI with their senior leaders, and they took them through an exercise to identify new product areas, right? What were potential product areas? And so at the end of the day, something that took 6 weeks, they got done in 4 hours. But the real incredible thing that the researchers found and the consultant found was that because you had these subject matter experts, right, people who knew their own functional area really, really well, that they could debate the outputs of Gen AI and say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. That doesn't make sense because, here's our financial situation, or here's been our go-to-market. We need to maintain a brand, or this is a really great idea. And so it brought them together in sort of a closer way in learning about AI while learning with AI.
So they almost collaborated better.
So, Microsoft's recent Work Trend Index annual survey created a lot of buzz, both in the learning space and the technology space and just in business in general. But yet, one of the things I thought was interesting I wanted to chat with you about is similar to your point earlier, Mark, irrespective of the fact that AI is going to and is currently transforming the workplace, the need for the human capability of innovation is more important than ever. So my question for you guys is, what are some things that business leaders can do practically to help generate more innovative thinking in this new era we're in?
Yeah, that was a fascinating report about the Frontier firm, right? And as I was reading that and thinking about what leaders really need to do, a couple of things came to mind. One of which is rethinking of how performance is measured and rewarded, right? Because we tend to think of, right, efficiency, output, productivity metrics. I think we need to start recognizing things like experimentation and learning and idea generation, right? And how do we measure the performance output of those types of things? The second thing that kind of came to mind was just the idea that, all of us, I'm sure, right? We're in meetings all day long, or we're doing admin tasks. How much time do we really have for unstructured thinking, for like really sitting down and doing deep thinking, reflection, this kind of cross-pollination? And I think there's a real opportunity there for leaders to say, look, we need to build this into our everyday work activities, make it something intentional and formal, that this is part of our work, right? This unstructured thinking time, this deep reflection. And then the other thing that I think is really important, and this is something that came out in that HBR article I referenced, is this idea of creating this environment of psychological safety, right? Because that's so important that leaders need to model curiosity from the top, which means asking questions instead of providing answers, right? And it also means allowing others to provide input and to feel free to kind of put themselves out there to express their ideas and their innovative thinking and their creativity. And so that psychologically safe environment is really, really super important, modeling that curiosity from the top. And I think finally, maybe just thinking about sort of the human stack of skills rather than just the tech skills, right? So we're bringing in AI. We just need to train everybody on how to prompt, maybe coding Gen AI, how to build agents, to think about those skills that we've been talking about here, in addition to, empathy, storytelling, design thinking, all these skills that kind of fuel this creativity, right? So that's what I was kind of thinking that was a bit missing from that report and what leaders can do.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can't follow that. I mean, that's Mark laid out exactly what you need to do. what I find interesting, this is kind of conceptual, but my daughter goes to Denison University, which is a small liberal arts school in Ohio that I also am an alum of. And I was out there for a campus visit within the last 12 months, and they're building a new data and analytics center, which you don't really think of data and analytics in liberal arts going together. And so I sat in to talk about what they're building. And then the first question came from, a parent who clearly had more of a STEM background and a data background because he knew this stuff real well. And he's like, why are you investing in data analytics right now? This makes no sense. And is there going to be a future in data and analytics for people? And, the answer was exactly what I thought it would be. It was like, this is the best time to be in data analytics. The problem is that, and it's the best time for a liberal arts school to be in data analytics because it's this intersection of STEM skills. You need to understand how these things work, and the human skills you need to be able to communicate and work with other people and work together, that you learn how to think and critically think in liberal arts school. And so I just feel like there's this like interesting moment where it's like, you have to be able to understand how this stuff works, but you also have to be able to work together as humans. So to me, it's as many opportunities as you can create to collide people together, I think would be my build on top of what Mark said. Is just, as a leader, is like any chance I can get to bring people together, I'm going to be better for it. Even having conversations like this, I learned a ton today in this call with you guys, and that's huge to walk away. Mark, I had some of this research I wasn't even aware of, and it's I think you have to do as much of that as you can.
Well, you made a great point there too, Jason. And just last week, I mean, this is a perfect corporate example of what you just said. I don't know if you guys caught it in the Wall Street Journal, where Moderna,
Gosh, yeah,
now merged their IT and HR departments.
yes, yep,
Under one leader.
yep.
Interesting story there.
Yeah, they're a company that explicitly, before many, made a decision to make AI essentially core to their operating model. And they actually say we are a technology company that happens to make, society altering and saving drugs. And they're probably a couple steps ahead of most, but making a move like that, I think, is indicative of the reality that things are moving quickly. So these ideas that we're talking about here regarding the things that leaders need to put into place so that they set their organization up to win. These ideas you talked about, Mark, are sort of leaving time for critical thinking and for, open-ended thinking, being willing to iterate and try new ideas. I want to maybe wrap up our discussion by asking the following question. How likely do you think it is that we will see corporate leaders, company leaders, whether they be sort of startups or more kind of blue chip companies, incorporating these ideas into how they operate? Are you pessimistic about it? Are they going to wait too long, or are they going to move quickly? Jason, I'll start with you.
I'm 100% optimistic, and I'm a big believer in kind of just capitalism in general. And the example I always give is when fracking became a thing in America, right? All of a sudden you could fracture oil underneath the surface. We managed to commoditize that in like 3 years. So once I think companies figure out that this is the mandate going forward, they will move faster than you can possibly imagine to figure out how to do it and do it really well. Or they risk obsolescence, and they know that. I mean, the ones that don't make the pivot and don't survive. I mean, the Microsoft report is kind of like it's a 5 red fire signal alarm or something. I can't think of the right words, right? But it's like, if you read that, you didn't at the end of it go, holy cow, we have got to make massive changes in everything we do. You need to retire. I mean, like, cause it is a 5-alarm fire that you need to react to right now. And my gut is that leaders will figure that out or they're going to fail. So Mark, do you think I'm crazy?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. I mean, they have to do it or they'll be left behind, right? And I think for some companies and some industries, if they haven't begun to consider and adopt this, it's already too late. But one of the interesting things that I see in some of the companies we work with is, what you might call this diffusion of innovation. There's a diffusion of innovation theory, but all it means is that there's such a wide variety and understanding and adoption levels across companies, but even within companies, right? So we'll meet with some companies and everybody is, experimenting with Gen AI, and you get some of the starting to scale across departments. But then you have a couple senior leaders who are like, they're risk adverse. I don't know what they're doing every day. They're spending time doing something. I'm very skeptical. What about data privacy and protection? And so oftentimes we see some of the roadblocks at the very top. That's a real dangerous thing. But the point is, I think just the spread and understanding, adoption, and comfort level, companies really need to overcome first. Because if you don't have everybody on board, then you're not going to be successful in doing this. Because face it, I mean, the three of us are in this all the time. We read about it and we're optimistic about it. But there's a lot of people out there who have never been on ChatGPT.
Well, that's a fair point. One of the things I talk a lot about in our work is just this idea that search is dead, right? Traditional search as we know it is gone the way of the dodo. And it's easy for me to say that, and there's tons of evidence pointing to it, but that doesn't mean there aren't hundreds of millions, if not billions, of daily users on traditional Google search using it all the time who've never used any type of AI experience. They, beyond whatever Google Gemini offers them. But it's just a matter of time, right?
Yeah, just a matter of time.
Just a matter of time.
It's going so fast too. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to thank both of you for your help today and your insights. I also learned a lot from you. And with that, I'm going to say thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah.
If you're leading through an AI-driven transformation of your business or see one coming and believe human traits can still give your business the edge, follow Irreplaceable. Each episode will explore what leaders can't afford to lose in an AI-first world.